Arizona, for all of you watching. And man, I've been looking forward to this event for a while. It's always such a treat to welcome a debut novelist, you know, at the beginning of what's going to be an important career. Malcolm Kempt and I, we got to meet first when I was able to do an interview for a magazine about this first book. And you know, you get sent, the publisher will send these advanced reading copies for us to check out. And it was just a couple pages in when I realized, wow, this is something really special. So with that build up, congratulations on the publication, and let's give them a nice warm welcome. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So where to start? I mean, this, tell us a little bit about, this is set in a very particular part of the world that really isn't written about or has not been written about much in fiction, to my knowledge anyway. Tell us where this book is set.
Well, I was a criminal lawyer for 17 years in the Canadian Arctic, and all of the communities in the particular territory where I worked are accessible only by air. So I was coming in by plane, you can get in by helicopter, and you can get in by boat in a very short window. So I worked there as a criminal lawyer doing defense work. And so when I sat down to write the first novel, I said, well, it has to be a crime novel and it has to be set in the Arctic. Even though I had other interests and other ideas, it made the most sense. And I really tried to capture the spirit of the place and the uniqueness of the place and kind of show people a part of the world that most people will never get to see.
Tell us a little bit about it. I mean, it's the specific community. It's this is a book of extremes in a lot of ways. You know, extreme weather, extreme hardiness, extreme poverty, beauty. You know, these different things. It's a tiny community of how many people?
I always get this wrong with Cape Dorset. At the time I was there, it's less than 1,000 people. Maybe it's 1,200 people. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's quite a small community. I always get all the populations confused because there's 26 towns that I used to go to all the time. But some of them are as small as 300 people. Some of them are as large as a couple thousand people. But they're all very isolated and very small.
Right. You know, you think about just some of the cast and character, which we'll get into. But you know, you think about, we all know people who escape up to Alaska, right? Because they want to go somewhere off the beaten path, or even Montana. That used to go there to disappear. You know, this is like that to the nth degree. And you know, you talk about you know, people that go there and they fall in love with the peculiar beauty of the place. And talk about that.
There's something about the Arctic, and anyone who starts getting really interested in the Arctic and reading about it and watching films about it, it's really easy to be captivated. And that feeling is times 100 when you're living there. And there's so many people who I've talked to during the course of working on writing this book about what is it about the Arctic that's so appealing, and no one was able to put it into terms that were the same or that were really articulate enough for me to put into the book. There's just such a mystique about the place, and it's so unique. I mean, the territory, the Nunavut territory where I was, is, you know, it's a fifth of the size of Europe with only 30,000 people. There's no trees, there's no plants. It's basically a desert covered in snow for the majority of the year. And then you get these, you know, the 6 months of light, 6 months of darkness. It's a barren, isolated, harsh place, and incredibly cold. But at the same time, it's beautiful. There's so many aspects of it that are breathtakingly gorgeous. So it's a place of contrast for sure.
And the community there is largely Inuit, right?
Yes, it's the territories. I believe it's still 85% Inuit. Yeah, and a lot of them are unilingual. They speak Inuktitut, which is the native language, and although many of them speak English, the education levels are low, so there's often a difficulty in communicating.
And so tell us about your protagonist in the book, Elderick Cole.
So Elderick Cole was working on a murder investigation outside of the territory, and he botched it. And so he ends up getting transferred up to this isolated town in the Arctic, and nothing in his life is going well. He's estranged from his daughter. He's divorced. His wife can't stand him. He's struggling with his own addictions issues and his own mental health issues. And so when this crime happens in the north to a young woman who he's particularly fond of, he sees solving that crime as his one shot at redemption, finding justice for her. So that's the essence of the story.
And the young girl who dies in the book, 16-year-old Native girl, it's sort of they think they're calling it a suicide. He thinks it's not, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. So and everyone wants to close the case because the community wants closure. Suicide is common. It has the territory has one of the highest suicide rates per capita in the world. So it's not implausible that it's just simply a suicide, but he's convinced that it is a murder. And so he's questioning himself through the novel as well of whether he's going to botch this as he botched the last murder investigation. And there's a lot of internal conflict there. And
so a lot of the raw material that I'm sure you collected for you were up in that region for how many years? 17?
17
17
years
on and off. And what kind of work did you actually do? Can you give us sort of an example of some of the cases that you were working?
Sure. Well, the territory has one of the highest violent crime rates per capita in the world. So there are no courts in a lot of these small towns, these isolated towns. So they have what they call a circuit court. So the court would fly into these towns, the full court. We used to joke that it was air justice. It would fly in these small planes, and they would bring everything with them, all the equipment, the court reporters, the prosecutor, the prisoners would come in from a prison outside of the territory, and they would hold court there on a regular scheduled sitting. And I would often fly in ahead of time to interview clients and represent people and represent them and deal with them when they had the court dates.
I'm gonna flip-flop.
Thanks. So that's what would happen. The court would come in, and then we would hold court for a week, and we would do murder trials and not murder trials, a lot of the less serious stuff. Murder trials would usually have their own sittings, but it happened on a regular basis.
Right. And in the book, one of the things you learn right away is that it's either 24 hours sunlight or 24 hours darkness, depending upon the time of the year. And when I was talking to him before, there's an epidemic of suicide that happens in this community. And see, guys, this is perfect for our hard-boiled noir discussion group. It's got all the ingredients. But I was very surprised to hear you say that. I was thinking they must happen when it's nighttime. They must happen when it's dark. And you said actually it's the other way around.
Well, I looked into this, and I've had disagreements with different people about the statistics, but the general consensus that I'd heard from people was that there was more suicides during the lighter months than there was in the darker months. And no one could give me a reasoning behind this. And it seemed to be that women would do it at a particular time, more so in the height of the summer, and men when the light first started coming back. And my only theory was that there's so much overcrowding there that in the wintertime most people are indoors a lot of the time, so you would be surrounded by family and you'd be in tight quarters, whereas in the summer you would have more time to be alone. That was the only theory I could come up with, but it's just one of many interesting, unique things about the territory.
That makes sense. I mean, on a much, much smaller level, we here in Arizona, come September, we're just so done with the summertime, I mean, it's just like, desperation and...
Meanwhile, in Newfoundland, we get like 6 weeks.
6 weeks. So, speaking of Newfoundland, tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and kind of, your path as a writer? Like, how do you get started writing?
Sure. I grew up in the east coast of Canada, a small island, Cape Breton Island. My father was a coal miner, and I went to university in Nova Scotia, law school there, and I had no intentions of becoming a lawyer. I had a career lined up outside of law, and I saw a job posting in the north, and I sent in a resume on colored paper with a picture of myself in the snow. And then out of 300 applicants, I got the job, and I was surprised. And then I had to leave, and 1-year contract turned into 17 years later. I was still there. So I was one of those people who fell in love with the place as well.
And how about your kind of writing? When did you decide you wanted to be a writer?
I was always creative. I mean, I played in bands. I wanted to go to art school. I was always doing something, and I still end up doing all kinds of creative endeavors. But with the writing, slowly over time, I became more and more interested in doing it while I was isolated in the north. And so I was taking workshops. I could do them by correspondence. And I was lucky enough to take workshops with Craig Clevenger and Chuck Palahniuk and Richard Thomas out of Chicago, and all of these people who were really instrumental in helping me learn how to become better at the craft. And I would write short stories, and I would dabble, and I would write drafts of things. And I was never really that serious about it until the pandemic hit, and it ended my law career. So then my wife said, now it's time for you to, let's do this. You're going to do it, become a writer and write full time. So that's what happened.
Were you able to save up a little nest egg to kind of keep you staggering along while you were doing this?
We opened an ice cream shop, if you can believe this.
No, I haven't heard this.
I don't think I've told anyone this, but we got a trailer on wheels, and then we fitted it out or kitted it out to be an ice cream shop and put it on the side of the highway because we were in a high tourist area right on the ocean. And so I was making lattes. It said espresso and ice cream. And so I was lattes and ice cream cones. And I did that. We did that every summer. It was a cash business. And that kept us afloat. Yeah, and then we had to close it. And everyone was really sad when we closed it when I got the book deal. But I was like, I can't have a 3-year-old and be trying to write a book and do this at the same time. So maybe we'll open it again. I don't know. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it because I got to meet all the tourists and talk to people about things, and a lot of people about books because I was writing at the time. So,
well, it's funny, and the way I've described the book thus far is, it sounds very downbeat and depressing and all that stuff, which I love. But
me too.
But there's so much more in this book. I mean, it's there's as we've talked about, the region has this peculiar, almost mystical quality to it, and I remember asking you about that, and you said something like, I've always been attracted to places that are where the veil is thin.
Totally. And I mean, I grew up in Cape Breton Island, and it has very strong Celtic roots. Now I live in Newfoundland, also has strong UK roots. I mean, there's a lot of, I was talking to you earlier about witchcraft and the cunning folk, and there's all these mythologies that are still existing in the culture, and it's a strange place. It's fog everywhere, and in the north you have the northern lights and the perpetual darkness, and they're just really interesting places, and they're isolated places with unique cultures, and I've always been drawn to those because I think those places are filled with stories that no one's going to hear because most people don't go there. So.
Right. It's interesting how the weather and the language, and the the extremes of weather kind of lend themselves to their own unique sort of mythology.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And we haven't talked about. Okay, so there's this kid in the book named Malik Tu. Talk about him. He's probably my favorite character in the book.
Oh, good. It's he's disfigured. So he was burned in a fire. And during my time in the north, I was traveling to all these communities, and I would often, I shouldn't say often, but I met a number of young people who had been burned in fires or had been burned in accidents. And because it's so isolated, and because there is great difficulty in getting people to a place where you could get specialized treatment fast enough, I also met a lot of adults who had severe burns who had never had them treated. So that always stuck with me, and it ended up, I put it into this character. and he is the brother of the victim in the crime, and ends up almost working with the protagonist, the police officer.
How old is he? Is he
He's 10.
10?
He's
10 years old.
Yeah. And everyone always mentions I mentioned in the novel that if you're under 12, you can't be charged with a crime in Canada. And people...
Parents are probably very aware of that. We'll send him in.
So I put I put that in the book, and then people kept bringing that up. Is that true? Is that true? Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah.
Were any of these characters, I'm sure they were kind of composites of people that you met and experienced. Were any of the specific kind of stories taken directly from real life?
None of them were taken directly from real life, but there were a lot of incidents. There's a scene, without spoiling it, with a dog in the book. And I had an experience where I'd encountered children doing what happens in the book with a dog. And I had heard other people talking about it. So these kind of things kind of filtered through where I would witness things or hear
Not
about
with
things.
a dog, by the way. To a dog. Very different kind of transgression.
So these things would filter through and end up in the book. And while nothing is based on an actual event or an actual person, there are a lot of composites. Like the protagonist is a composite of all of the police officers I'd met over the years, and I'd worked with so many of them and met so many of them, and they were so great about sharing their stories and their anecdotes. And I think it's common in I hate to say war zones, but in places of great conflict and great tragedy, where when people get a break, everyone, nurses, doctors, lawyers, would sit around, and then they would share their horror stories and share their anecdotes of good ones, but predominantly a lot of the bad ones. And so I think I absorbed a lot of that during the time that I was there, and a lot of that made its way into the book in one way or another.
Right. And the protagonist, Elderick Cole, he has a colleague who's a Native woman police officer. And we were talking a little bit in the back about, this ridiculous era of cancel culture. And, he deftly skirts that by having his main protagonist, be an outsider. But you see reflected through this partner kind of character the Native viewpoint. And it's not what you think, at least for me as a reader. I was like, that's interesting. She didn't respond the way I would have thought. Talk about that.
Well, I was an outsider there, even after spending 17 years there and learning a lot of the language and the culture. And I'd co-written a book about seal hunting methods of the Inuit. Like, I was never a tourist. I was always invested in the place. But at the same time, I'll always be an outsider in the same way that if someone from Oklahoma moves here, they can spend a lot of time here, but they're never truly from that place. And especially in a case where, I'm not Inuit. So when I sat down to write the book, I said, okay, I have to be clear that, I'm not speaking for the Inuit. I'm not an expert on Inuit culture. But at the same time, I wanted to capture what I had seen of the place and what I'd experienced. So I tried to put it in the book through an outsider, as I was an outsider. So, and I hope I did a good job.
Definitely. We started talking about Maliktu a little bit, and how do you say it? Maliktu. And he has visions. I was asking him at first if he'd ever read the book Black Elk Speaks, about this young Lakota kid. Beautiful book, if you ever read it. But the way he kind of looks at the world kind of reminded me of this kid, in kind of a mythic way.
Well, I think too, I think back to when I was a 10-year-old boy. I think as kids, we have such a vivid imagination as well on top of that. So he's caught between two cultures where he's immersed in Inuit culture and he's hearing all these stories from his grandparents and stories about his culture, much in the same way me growing up in Cape Breton, I would hear all these, the forerunners and the lights in the woods and all the Celtic myths and things. You take that very seriously as a 10-year-old boy in a way that you wouldn't take it seriously if you were a 45-year-old police officer. So it was a chance to dive into Inuit mythology indirectly and tell those stories, kind of a lot of that stuff through him.
Right, and then Cole himself, he has that Celtic background, and he has inherited the second sight, right? Is that what you call it?
I forget what I called it in the book, but I think he was touched. He's got this. He's kind of close to the veil. This ability to see things, and it's funny because even in Newfoundland now we've got ditch witches. People with their divining rods, and then I know university educated people who will say, "Well, we'll get them in anyway, just to check." And so it's ingrained in the culture, and I think it's good that we don't remove it, because I think we need a little bit of that magic and mysticism in our lives.
So he's kind of tripping out, and the kid's kind of tripping out, and so they have sort of a nice bond.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I think the relationship it worked out perfectly the way I want it to. I don't want to say too much, because I always think I go to say things and then I'm like, that's going to spoil this, that's going to spoil that. So I don't want to spoil too much about the book, but
right.
Yeah.
It's packaged as a thriller, and it definitely is, or a crime story. But this is a novel that kind of, I'm interested in hearing what your influences are. I know that there's a strain of like Lovecraft and Algernon Blackwood that we talked about. Who are some of the authors that sort of informed this book?
Well, it's
or
funny,
that you admire?
People always ask me about crime novels. What crime novels should I read? But I've never been a big crime novel person. I don't read a ton of crime novels. I'd much rather sit and read Zola, or I love J.K. Huysmans, the A Rebours. Like, I love older French books. I love Michel Houellebecq. But all of that stuff I take little bits of things from those, and they've ended up in the book, and they end up in my writing. But a lot of what ended up in the book here, Lovecraft, there's a ton of Lovecraft. There's a series by the British Library called Tales of the Weird, and it's a whole series, and it's all short stories on different themes from the 1800s up until the 1920s, and I devour them. I love them, and I think all that weird fiction influence is in there. And I had
Arthur Machen and
yes,
people
Arthur
like
Machen.
that.
Love it, yeah. And I toned it down to some degree, because you don't want it to be a horror novel, because a lot of people aren't interested in the supernatural, but because there's undertones of that in the culture where I grew up and in the Arctic, it fit. It made sense at the time. So
Yeah, I mean, James Lee Burke, I don't know if you know his
I do,
work.
yeah.
One of my heroes, he does it too. He has the same sensibility where there's always a part of him that's in the past, or
And I watched True Detective season 1. I don't know how many of you have seen it.
Oh, that's great.
I was watching it and I was thinking, they got into my brain. How did they get into my brain? It was so perfect for me. And all the references, The King in Yellow, Robert Chambers, which I love that book. So yeah, it was fascinating.
So how long did it take to write this book?
I've been writing this in dribs and drabs over the years. I think a lot of scenes I had written. The way I write, and people have asked me about the process of my writing, I have these things called waste books. So I carry around books with me, and I write a scene, I write dialogue, I write notes, I write snippets of things, and sometimes they can be completely unrelated. So over the years, as I picked back through those, there were tons of scenes that ended up in the book, or that got fleshed out, or I had cannibalized from other stories and other ideas where I said, well, that would fit in here. I had written an early draft of a novel that had a lot of the elements in it quite a number of years ago now, and then I resurrected that and redid it when I sat down in the pandemic to have a full-time writing career. And then that manuscript won the best unpublished manuscript in Newfoundland, where I'm from, which is probably the only reason why I'm sitting here.
Wow. In Newfoundland, or?
Yes, they have an award there, the Percy Janes Award for the best unpublished manuscript, and it's anonymous. You have to submit it completely unmarked and anonymous. And I almost fell over when I won it because I didn't expect it. And my agent has said that's the only reason why. Well, not the only reason why, but that's why he decided to read the novel, because he took that seriously when he saw I'd won this award.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I like that, the anonymous.
Yeah, it's great.
Entry.
It's a great way to do it.
Keep it real, yeah. So is that how you got the agent?
Yeah, well, I didn't go about the regular process with agents either. Everyone says you have to do this and you have to do that. And I went through and tried to find a handful of people I thought were really compatible and people I thought would be a fit for the book. And yeah, and I saw Gideon he's at Inkwell Management in New York, and I saw him on the website, and my wife looked at him on social media, and then I read his bio, and I was like, this guy, and I sent it to him, and I sent it to a number of other people, and I think it's a much better way to do it, because if I know people who sent it out to 100 agents, and it's a scatter shot, and it paid off for me anyway. It's great, and Gideon's fantastic. Yeah.
Did he have a role in helping you kind of shape the structure of the book, or
absolutely? Yeah, we had a phone call, which is what sealed the deal. I had other agents that had the novel and were interested in reading it, and we had a phone call, and he sat down and we talked about the narrative on this really long phone conversation, and the notes I took from my handful of conversations with him, I took and spent 3 months just reshaping everything in the novel that needed to be reshaped to make it better. And I actually Googled, I keep saying this in interviews, but I Googled how long should it be before I get back to an agent. And it said 3 months. And so I wrote down the date, and then I said every morning I got up and I worked on it for 3 months. And then I sent it to him on that day. And he loved it. So
very exciting. This, I guess the New York Times is going to run a review this weekend. And you haven't seen it yet, right?
No. Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah, it's getting raves from places that normally don't rave, like Kirkus. They gave you a killer review.
Yeah.
And they're always grumpy and like, this sucks, and not this time.
No. And the book list review I almost fell over. Yeah, they said if you only read one mystery this year, this should be the book. And I was like, well, I couldn't ask for anything better than that.
No. So before we kind of open it up to some questions from the audience, how do you follow that up?
I'm just going to quit. This is it. I'm done. No, it's a two book deal with Crown, and so I'm working on a second book, and the second book will be set in Newfoundland, and it'll also be a crime novel. And I'm hoping that I can show the unique aspects of that place and that culture, as well as tell a really cracking crime story at the same time. And all people know of Newfoundland, it seems these days, is Come From Away or the shipping news. So I'm hoping that I can show all the depth and all the interesting things about the place. Yeah.
How does one fly into Newfoundland? What would the route be?
It's annoying because we're so close to Maine, but if I wanted to go to Maine, I'd have to go, I think, Halifax, Toronto, and then, down to probably Newark or somewhere. And then it ends up being a roundabout way because the demand isn't there for the population for the flights. So same with getting to Europe. I got to go backwards to Toronto for a few hours and then fly, over to Europe. So
is the population decreasing, or is it?
I don't think it's decreasing. It's definitely not booming. Yeah, they've got a big immigration push now to try to get more people to the island. But no, I don't think it's really decreasing. But it's not bumping. Yeah, it's an isolated place. It's like anywhere else that's isolated and doesn't have a lot of big draws or industries. We get a ton of tourism. The place is flooded with people in the summer.
Well, you're in the book. Your town in the book, obviously way more remote than that even.
Yes.
But is there? Do kids growing up there? Is there a realistic? Do they have dreams of getting out
in Nunavut or in Newfoundland?
In the first one.
Oh, in the first one. They
both actually, I guess.
In Nunavut, more so now, I think, than when I first got there in 2004. I think there's a lot more opportunities now where they're trying to get programs together where the kids can have a transition year before they go to university because they have to leave the territory. And distance-wise, it's the equivalent of flying from here to Maine to go to university. It's a big transition, and you lose all your support network with your family and all their culture. But there are people that are doing it. I mean, they're producing lawyers and vets and police officers and all these different careers. Inuit people are doing it, and I think while there's a lot of struggles, there's a lot of social problems, and there's stuff that needs to be dealt with. There's also a lot of hope, which is I try to put that in the book. Was in the darkest of times, there's still hope, and I think there is hope for the people there. Yeah.
Are there decent grade schools and?
In Iqaluit,
probably a high school.
in the capital, there's a good system. I mean, they've got schools there. There's schools in all the towns, but the quality of the education in a really isolated town with 300 people compared to in a city, an urban center, it's going to be a big difference.
Does anybody have any questions?
Is there a university there?
Oh, there's the
Usually
place.
they usually leave.
Yeah, they have something called the Arctic College, and the Arctic College does everything from business skills to it's almost like a community college, I would call it. But I haven't looked into it too much, so I don't know if they've improved their curriculum. They did produce a law program that turned out a ton of lawyers that a lot of them are successful. So it's happening. It's improving. Yeah, but there's no university there. No, they would go to southern Canada or to the United States in order to go to university. Yeah.
So, book number 2 that's set in Newfoundland.
Yes.
Same protagonist.
No.
Okay.
No, different protagonist.
So this is not book number 1 of the series.
No, it wouldn't be. It won't be a series. And we talked about that at the very beginning when I had signed the book deal, that it wouldn't be a series. But I never say never that the characters in this won't reappear in some form or another, or that I won't end up going back to the north at some point. But I said I was tired of writing about darkness and cold. So I had to
Well, Malik too's got to grow up, doesn't he?
I guess, yeah. But I'm hoping it'll inspire a lot more Inuit and non-Inuit Arctic writers. There's a ton of writers up there. Inhabit Media is a company out of Toronto, and they put out a couple of anthologies, horror anthologies, and there's a lot of Inuit writers in those. And I've got a lot of hope that I think this book will hopefully open a window or a door or something that they can slip through and get into the industry and do some more.
So, Patrick, we've got some online questions as well. So, one of the questions that they want to know was a little bit about the origin of the novels, and what did you write previously before actually getting into A Gift Before Dying? They're very interested in that. Also, there's that desire of why crime fiction? What made you decide, because you have a love of literature, why did you decide crime fiction was the way to go for your very first published novel?
I wrote horror predominantly when I was writing short stories when I first started, because I really enjoyed watching horror films. I enjoyed reading horror, and the supernatural and the weird has always really interested me. But as a criminal lawyer, just embedded in that life, I realized I had to write a crime story if I was going to do it in the North. And I do love crime shows. I love crime novels. It's just not something that I throw myself into. I know people who only read crime. They read every Ian Rankin novel. And that's never been me. But I do enjoy a good crime novel, and I think early on when I first started getting into reading novels, All the Beautiful Sinners by Stephen Graham Jones was a big influence. Red Dragon, which aren't really crime novels, but they're not horror novels either. But there's a horror element to them, and so it's books like that I thought I can take a crime novel and take it somewhere different, as they did. So not as good as those two, I don't think, but.
Well, there's a big kind of renaissance going on in horror, especially with Native writers. I mean, he's just one. It seems to be a kind of a blossoming of that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't read any of his newer his last few books, but I know that's a whole movement. There was the Never Whistle at Night was a
Right.
horror anthology that came out that was all Aboriginal authors. I was just in one, and I was the only non-Aboriginal author in this one that came out from Inhabit Media. Which I think it's great. It's really great.
Respect.
Yeah.
Jim, did you have a question?
Yes, when you began, you talked about the judge and the lawyers, everyone flying in for trials. What sort of structure or authorities do the little villages have aside from that? Is there any kind of...
Oh, you mean in terms of infrastructure or justice or?
Right.
Oh, well, they would have a justice of the peace. So someone in the community, there's actually a character in the book, he's appointed the lay coroner, or they would have a justice of the peace. Sometimes they had two. So if they had documents that needed to be signed, that could be done. Most towns have like like a little town council, a little an office set up to run things, as you would in any small town that's 400 or 500 people. Sorry. No, nothing like that. So that's the difficult part. So they would have a police detachment there that would have a couple of cells. So if you had an incident where 4 or 5 people had to be arrested, they got to share cells. You got nowhere to put them. We once when
It's kind of like Mayberry.
Yes, it's a lot like Mayberry. But we once were getting on the plane, and then we were getting ready to leave, and then the plane was delayed. We were on like an 8-man small little plane, and someone came out and told us, "Oh no, the judge put the guy who does the refueling in jail, so he's got to come out to do the refueling and put him." So you get into these strange situations in these towns, right? Because everything is so isolated and everything's so interconnected. Yeah.
Are all the law enforcement RCMP or are they local police?
They are RCMP, but they do have some community constables in some of the towns. In Cape Dorset, when I was there was a community constable.
You might have to explain what that is.
Sure, it's just there's a person from the community who is given a limited amount of powers as a police officer in order to, he would be given special tasks to do and assist the police in different cases and things. Yeah, but that didn't happen in every town. There was only some of the towns that had that. Yeah. Another thing I should say about Cape Dorset is I wrote it as it was when I first got there. Now I'm told they have 6 officers. They've got full cell service. Like the place is modernizing. And Iqaluit, the capital, I think it's gained about probably 2,500 people since I left. And not since I left, but since I first arrived there. And now you can get a latte there. You can get there's a fancy coffee shop, and like it's modernizing really fast.
Well, there's a pretty vibrant like Aboriginal art kind of scene there, right?
Cape Dorset is fantastic. Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. This novel is so grim and it's tragic, but I keep coming back to the laughter of Inuit women when they're in a group is a very specific sound, and it's a wonderful thing to hear, and it always little things like that stay with me. And the art in Cape Dorset is another one. The art in that town is phenomenal. They do soapstone carving, they do printmaking, and they've got a whole art studio set up there, and it's the main source of income for a lot of the people in the town. And they produce some incredible work. If you get online and look for Cape Dorset artwork, it'd blow you away. Very, very talented people. But then I'd have clients who, have no education, who have terrible criminal records. And then in their spare time, they're producing these gorgeous stone-carved works of art, and it's such a contrast. It's fascinating.
That figures into the book a little bit.
Yes, yeah. I didn't really get into the artwork in the book, but again, there was so many things I wanted to get into as well that I never got a chance to. So maybe a second book in the Arctic at some point down the road, way down the road.
Now, there are a couple of minor characters that I'm thinking, okay, these are probably a nod to a real, like the people that run the inn in the book.
Yeah.
Is that based on a real?
It's funny there's a beautiful hotel in Cape Dorset.
Okay.
It's very nice now. When I first went there was an old rundown building that was pretty much condemned, and you also share rooms in the north. So you could be, in your room, and at 3 a.m, someone would knock on the door, and it would be like a electrical worker who just flew in the middle of the night, and he's going to share the room with you. Like, and that would happen quite often. So it's all these quirky, strange things. But that hotel, I spent so much time there. I lived there for a long time at that hotel that I described in the book. And the woman who runs it in the book is probably a composite of other women in other towns who ran the hotels there. But so it was an interesting adventure, interesting place.
So the communities are that are in the far north. They're very remote from the capital, from the other from the other provinces and territories. But what about from each other? I mean, can people get in between them? I mean, can they cross the ice during the winter? Or?
It's really interesting. Like in Iqaluit is the capital, but then Nunavut is a day's snowmobile ride away. But then if you wanted to go to Pangnirtung, which is up farther, that might be, a week or longer. Like it's so people do those epic trips on snowmobiles, multiple day trips, particularly if they're hunting. but for the most part, people are flying back and forth between the towns, and there is some, I think, government funding and government initiatives so that people who live there have cheaper flights in order to get back and forth to visit family and things. But that's when it gets complicated, because if there's a funeral, you got to fly an entire family to a town, a 4-hour flight away in another area. So it's difficult.
Can the planes fly in the winter?
Oh yes, oh yes. I've been on the plane, and it's a full on whiteout blizzard. Yeah, it's pretty wild. It can be pretty hairy, pretty wild. But the great thing is, I've had friends who have been pilots up there, and now they fly for the major airlines, and they're flying into Dubai and places like that. And I'm like, if they can handle flying an 8-man plane through a blizzard, they can fly that big automatic jet anywhere, I would say.
I'm glad you said blizzard, because the weather is a plot kind of element in this book. Towards the end, we won't give away, but
Well, I wanted the place to be almost a character in itself,
Mhm.
and the weather. You're at the mercy of the weather when you live there entirely, and so that has to factor into every decision you make when you're there, and so it's always constantly in the back of your mind, the environment, and so I tried to put that into the novel, and it ended up becoming a huge part of the novel, as it is a huge part of living there. So.
now the original case that kind of landed your protagonist, Elderick Cole, up there, was that based on a real case?
No, it wasn't based on a real case, no. And I mean, I'd known so many lawyers, criminal lawyers in the country, and I'd heard so many lawyers talk about cases, so I'm sure it may have trickled down subconsciously into a real case, but no, it wasn't based
Nothing
on a real
real.
case.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. As you're out on the road and kind of meeting different people, are you getting tons of suggestions, like book recommendations,
No,
things to read?
no, none. No, people keep asking me for them, and I'm like, I'm the wrong person to ask because I have such a strange taste. So
Yeah.
Yep.
PK, do we have any more online queries?
Everybody's fascinated about Malcolm's life in the Arctic. Would you mind describing a little bit about what it's like living up there and where you live? And I think they're just really intrigued. I know we've got one gal from Italy who's on, and so she was trying to kind of get an idea. Stefania, yeah. So she was trying to get a little bit of an idea of what life is like for Malcolm up in the frigid north.
sure. And if she's from Italy, I just want to mention Ilaria Tutti. Great series, the Battaglia series. It's a 3-book series. That is a crime series that I do love. When I lived in Iqaluit, I lived most of the time on the Road to Nowhere, which is an iconic place in Iqaluit, and it's literally called the Road to Nowhere, even though it does go somewhere. And I lived high up on a hill above the town. The town is right on Frobisher Bay, and Frobisher Bay is frozen for a large chunk of the year. Once it freezes over, and it does every year, it stays frozen, and you can snowmobile for days. When I first got there, I worked right downtown, and I could snowmobile to work every day. A lot of people snowmobile everywhere. Yeah, there's a lot more. Again, there's a lot more cars in the town now than there was when I first got there. But people rely on snowmobiles to get everywhere. The weather is unbelievably cold, particularly if you get up into communities like Grise Fiord and Pond Inlet. Those are high up, almost at the top of Greenland, just to give you some perspective. And those places are incredibly cold in the winter, and to the point where
What are we talking here?
it's hard with me Fahrenheit because I don't do Fahrenheit, but it could get to minus, like with the wind chill, minus 65 with the wind chill in some of those places. Like, yeah,
So, growing up in Newfoundland in that area,
it's cold, but it's never
it's
that
nothing
cold.
like that.
No, no. Like minus 35 would be nothing. Like minus 40, like you would
It's-
experience that living in the Arctic if you were traveling around a lot. Yeah, sure, in the middle of the winter.
So, okay, let's say it was 5 degrees out. Are people walking around in short sleeve shirts and stuff?
No, but it's funny because in April, if you're in Iqaluit, it's very low down in terms of all the Arctic communities, it's a beautiful time to be there because it can get up to 5 degrees, but everything is a winter wonderland. So it's completely snowy and frozen, and it's beautiful, and the light is coming back, and it's 5 degrees. But if you were to be in southern Canada and it was 5 degrees and there was snow everywhere, no one's out in a sweater. But down there, you probably would be. They also get more sunshine in that time of year, so it's always bright and sunny, and it's always blue skies. So I think that makes a difference as well. But you wouldn't believe it in Pond Inlet in the dead of winter. It's like you're on the moon. It really is. And everything is covered with a thick layer of the inside of a refrigerator that's, not working very well. It's pretty great. It's pretty fantastic.
Wow.
Now that I'm not there and I'm warm, it's great.
Did you meet plenty of people that came up and couldn't hack it?
Oh yes, people burn. It had an incredibly high burnout rate, and I talk about that a little bit in the book. But people come up for 1 year contract, 2 year contract, and they don't stay. And I think a lot of times they get, they're very empathetic people, and they get burned out. And they're also, if you're coming into a town as a social worker where there's intense social problems and there's only 300 people and it's completely isolated in the dark of winter, a lot of people are relying on you for things that aren't within your job description. And you want to do them because you want to help people. And I think that's what, when I was up there, you end up coaching the hockey team and you end up trying to help people with their will. I don't do wills, but I'll try, but if you have to kind of pull back or else you will burn out. And a lot of people do.
Did you meet your wife up there?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. We met in Iqaluit. Yeah. She was working in the office where I was. Office romance. So don't tell the people on the.
So what you mentioned is the violent crime per capita.
Yeah.
Capital. What a lot of the crimes, I'm assuming, are crimes of desperation. And what's the drug of choice up there?
Well, that's the sad thing is when I first got there, there was a lot of marijuana, and marijuana was a problem there because a lot of people underage were smoking marijuana, and it can be very detrimental to their mental health. And people will steal and do things to get the money to buy it. But now they're seeing, so I hear in recent months, they're seeing, hard drugs coming in a big way. And they're coming in through the gangs in southern Canada. And it's disastrous for a place like that doesn't have the resources. They don't have an addiction center. They've got all these people who already have addictions issues with alcohol and marijuana. And now you're going to bring in cocaine and meth and street drugs. Yeah, it can't be good.
So what would be the average policeman? What kind of crimes are they going to? What are they mainly like? What would be what are the murders arising from? Are they family?
It's almost all. I would say almost all domestic or family related. Most of the murders. The majority of them are alcohol related. You've got a house party. The house party ends. There's people left over, and someone, the body is found, and then the investigation unfolds. There, you see a lot of that, and that makes it even more tragic because the victims are, the sons and daughters and uncles and mothers of the accused, and then it's very tragic.
But there's hope.
But there is hope, yeah. And I that's the only thing that kept me going for 17 years was, like volunteering with the hockey team or, helping the kids out or taking the kids out to do something. Or it's the only thing that can keep you going, small victories. And that's whenever I would talk to young lawyers who would come up, I'd say small victories. Don't try to save everybody. Don't try to do more than you can, which is hard to do sometimes because you want to. It's human nature. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you still see that there, and it's interesting you say that because in the prison system there, they actually take the prisoners out in groups with rifles and they go hunting together, and it's a great program, and it's effective and it works well, and because it's a hunting culture, and if you curb that, the culture dies. So it has to. Yeah, exactly. So it has to keep going, and so they still hunt. Every community, people are hunting all the time. Yeah.
I was trying to remember when Maliktu made his appearance, And is there a part that do you read from the book at all, or
I haven't yet, but
You
I
haven't
can. I
yet?
can. No.
is there a part that you want to give us a little taste, and then we'll wrap it up?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Do you want me to read any particular part, or it doesn't matter? I could read the first bit of chapter 2 there. It's great, yeah.
That's the ARC. I don't know if they made any changes, but
Oh, yeah. I don't think. Not in this chapter, I don't think. Maliktukulu stood motionless in the moonlight, far out on the frozen ocean. The oversized parka, stained with blood and fat, hung down below his knees. Disfigured skin covered the boy's entire face from untreated burns he had suffered as a toddler. He cradled a weighty rifle wrapped in caribou pelt in his spindly arms. Next to him, his grandfather, Pingwatsiak, sat on the snowmobile with his own gun slung across his back. The long trim around the old man's hood wicked away the moisture of his breath, creating a halo of ice around his weather-beaten face.
nice.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Well, hey, Malcolm, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and congratulations on the book. And thanks everybody for watching online and here
Yeah.
in person. Yeah.
I'm so glad I came down. Thanks for having me, and I'm really glad you guys all came out. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.